Hi, this is going to be a one take of my seventh or eighth take of trying to show assigning an IP address on a switch, finding the switches, assigning an IP address, possibly naming the switches, doing the first login within the management interface, then assigning a different VLAN ID than VLAN ID 1 for the management interface, steps that are needed to do that. And last but not least, to then save the configuration to the switch, as well as an automatic configuration adapter, an ACA, which is either in the form of a SD card or a USB. Some devices support both, like the RSPE, and I believe it is the Greyhound 1040. Whereas others, like the Bobcat, is only a USB-C. And in the case of the RSP, it only supports an SD card. So what we're doing today is we're going to show this illustration with the BRSs. The two RSPs that I have here are two different of a configuration. This one down here has an added FPGA, and if I do a discovery on these, you will also notice that not only does one have an FPGA, but if I scroll all the way over here, these, they're the bottom two. One is a 2S, this is a 2 standard, whereas this is a 2A or advanced firmware or management feature set. And what this does is it adds additional ACL complexity, and it also offers the ability to act as a sub-ring manager. So that said, what we're going to do is we're going to use these two here. I am going to use the HiDiscovery app to actually assign an IP address, and I'll show you here in a second why. First thing I want to do is I want to be able to signal the switch, and I'm going to start off with this switch right here. This is the one that I'm currently directly plugged into, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it an IP address that I can use these pre-defaults that I've set using this right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this and this, and the only thing I need to do is change the last octet. So I'm currently in a 10.10.10.10.99 network. We'll make this a .2. No gateway, and for the sake of a name, give it Herman. And just a quick ping. Yep, I can talk to it, and because I can talk to it, I'm now also going to browse the switch itself. We have a self-signed certificate warning, and we're going to log in with admin private, all lowercase, and obviously it's going to now push us to change that password. And I will log in with these new credentials. So you'll see several security alerts. This is the newest management interface look, and it very much reflects the previous look. It is a sleeker look. It does respond very nicely, very quickly. So one of the first things we're going to do is, let me go back to settings under network. You'll notice that the management interface is set for VLAN ID 1. Before we set this to anything else, we need to go through a very brief step, and we need to at least create that VLAN. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to VLAN, configuration, and I'm going to go ahead and add a VLAN, and we're going to call this VLAN ID, we're going to put the management VLAN into VLAN ID 20. So we've created this. Let me hit set, make sure that it's actually taken, do a refresh, and next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our basic settings under Network, and we're going to change our VLAN ID to VLAN ID 20. Hit Set. Now it's asking us as to what the management port is, and I am currently plugged into that switch with my management port on port 6. Hit OK. And at this point, this is all that we really need to do. We're still talking to the switch, so we're not disconnected from it. And additionally, if I were to look at my VLAN settings, let me do a quick refresh just to make sure that it's been captured. If I look at my VLAN ID 20, you'll see that it's now getting port 6 untagged. And it has also taken VLAN 20 and assigned it to port 6. So we're good there. So this is really good. We're pretty much done at this point. The only thing that we need to do is we need to save the configuration. And with this, what we can do is we can hit Save. When we do this, we move the running configuration, which is in RAM, which is volatile memory, meaning that if you lose power, everything that's in your RAM is gone. And it's moving that RAM configuration and storing it in non-volatile memory. This will persist through a power cycle. And at this point in time, we then have a non-volatile memory config. This is the config that the switch will then start from, and it will also have a fingerprint. We can also back this up to remote server. We have a undo configuration modification. This is ideal if this is a switch that is far away, if you can enable this feature. And if I enable it, what it's going to do is it's going to monitor a heartbeat between the switch and my PC, which is the 10.99. And if at all, any time I lose comms, it will start a countdown from, in this case, 600 seconds. This can be reduced. I forget what the lowest value is, but it's somewhere around 30 seconds. It appears to be 30 seconds. Other things that you can then do is you also have the option for external memory. Currently there's none present. I do have one of these ACA devices for this switch. This is our Bobcat series. It utilizes a USB-C memory adapter. And when I plug this into the switch, and excuse me, my LEDs are still dancing on the switch. There we go. And let's do a refresh over here. So you'll notice that the status for the USB is now okay. I have this device inserted. And what I can then do is if I now save the configuration, not only is the latest change or anything that I may have made saved to non-volatile memory, but what I also now have is I also now have an external non-volatile memory. And this will have exactly the same fingerprint as this, the configuration that's stored on the switch. So with this, what I can do is I can now unplug this. So you'll notice that we have a system name of Herman. We will put this location as Richmond, Virginia, and your contact person is me. Hit set, and again, just to make sure that it's going to persist through the configuration or through a power cycle, and to also have a copy of this on the external memory, we're going to do another save. That's good. Do a refresh, and we have a match on the fingerprints. So with this, I've now unplugged this USB device. So if I were to go back up in here and do a refresh, it'll give me a not present. I can even have it give me an alert if for some reason this ACA is unplugged or not in sync with the switch. So what I'm going to do now is I have try that again. I have this switch, and the only reason that we're seeing just this switch is that I've now VLAN'd myself into just this switch because of the port that I'm on. And if I plug into a different port on that switch, and if I do a rescan, I don't find that .2. So I'm going to now take this other BRS over here, and I'm going to give it exactly the same configuration as I have the other BRS. And it's just a matter of plugging in the flash drive, unplugging the power of that BRS, plugging it back in, and you'll notice the MAC address of this is an 897A. So if we now do a rescan, it's not going to find it. And the only way that we're going to find that first BRS is by doing a rescan when plugged into the management port. So this is the first BRS that we configured, that we put a copy of the configuration onto the ACA of simply by clicking on the save button. And the other switch is in the process of booting right now. It's going to pull down the configuration, and if you also had a copy of the firmware along with a text file that points at the file name of that firmware, the switch will first automatically either update or automatically backdate its firmware, reboot, and then pull in the configuration. This way you actually end up with a clone down to the firmware level. And in this case, the other switch has rebooted. Technically, I think, now it's only going to go through to this one switch. So again, this is the first one. This is an EB40, and I now need to unplug from this port and plug into the other switch's management port on 6, which is where we created the VLAN. So again, this is the first one. It's an EB40. If I do a rescan, we now have the clone of it that I just plugged into, which is an 897A. So we now have two switches that are exact clones of each other. Because of the management change, the management VLAN ID change, I unfortunately don't have access to both of them at the same time. Quick heads up. I've plugged into this RSP, and that RSP is then plugged into this BRS, and that same RSP is then also plugged into the other BRS, actually into both of their management ports. And as a result, I can see both of them here in high view. And if wired like this, what you can also do is, because you have access to both of these, I can click on the first one, I can signal it, I know that this is the right one, and I can give it a different IP address. So now if we scan it, we now have differing IP addresses. And obviously we can then put there. So hope this has been beneficial. Let me know if there's anything else I can do for you.